All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today we're going to be looking at the 2022 Georgia Bulldogs spring preview. The Bulldogs finally got it done, ending a 40-plus year drought, winning the national championship. But if they want to repeat, it's going to be a tough uphill climb. A lot of production's gone. I think they're 13th in the conference in returning production. So today we're going to be looking at both sides of the ball, looking at every positional group, see who's going to be stepping up this year and who to look for in the spring. Starting things off at quarterback, though, it's pretty deep at the position. Brock Vandegrift, Gunnar Stockton, two former high-up recruits, along with Carson Beck. They're going to be all trying to come after Stetson Bennett's job. I think this is his sixth year now. He's coming back after a monumental fourth quarter of the national championship game. He was big late in that contest to get them the ring. This is his job to lose. I don't see him not starting. But these other guys, they'll be important for them to learn the offense, make some plays, see who's going to be that backup quarterback in case anything goes wrong. Stetson, though, he's gotten better significantly, I think, at diagnosing defenses, making decisions. He's no longer someone just to disrespect. 2,800-plus yards last year, 29 touchdowns, 7 picks, 204 yards per game. He was a guy that I called an above-average game manager. He was not a guy that's going to be able to exactly carry the offense, even though he did a pretty good job of doing that. I thought in the final 3 games of the year, I thought he did a pretty good job of carrying the offense. 2 300-plus yard games. He had that big fourth quarter, of course, against Bama in the Natty. Bennett, an above-average game manager. I think that's still kind of his role at Georgia. He might have to be a little bit more better this year in terms of carrying the offense. Might be leaned on a little bit more. We'll get to the running game here in a minute, but Bennett, he's improved tremendously. He's a guy that I'm no longer probably going to disrespect. He earned tremendous amounts of respect in that national championship game. He's also improved his accuracy tremendously, not just from a 64.5% completion percentage. His accuracy downfield is pretty good. It's not spotty like some of these other quarterbacks. I thought there's numerous times where, in years prior, he would overthrow a wide open guy. He wasn't doing that in numerous games last year. He's putting it right on the money, whether that was the James Cook or an actual receiver downfield. I thought he improved tremendously in some of those categories, and pretty good quarterback, I'd say, coming into this season. I'd say he's, top half of the conference in terms of a passer. Bennett, his experience is obviously going to be big for a younger team. His leadership, too. He's a pretty good leader, I'd say. The players love him. So Stetson Bennett, I think he's got this QB position racked up. Good for him. The former walk-on wins a national championship, and he comes back to potentially do it again. Moving to this running game, why I think he might have to carry the offense a little bit more is because I'm not really sure what's going to happen with this running game. They're pretty deep at running back. Todd Monken's still here, so the philosophy is going to be the same. But they might lack the same explosiveness because James Cook is now gone. But they still have numerous different skill sets here at running back. Kenny McIntosh, he's a very good pass catcher. He can make plays on the outside. He hits the hole in a hurry as well. And then on the other hand, Kendall Milton, he's slightly bigger at 220. McIntosh is 210. He's more muscular, though. He's bigger of the two. He does a lot of work as an inside runner. He's very strong, very physical. He's tough to bring down. So they still have two similar backs, or two vastly different backs, similar to last year, I would say. As they had the James Cook, who was the slicing and dicing, the versatile guy, then Zamir White, who's mainly just the ground and pound runner. So I think they still kind of have that. Branson Robinson as well. He's a top 5 running back from the class of 2022. True freshman. I think he might see some touches here. 5'11", 220. He fits the scheme. He's he's another one of those physical rounders that can really do a lot. So he fits what they want to do here at Georgia. He might get a healthy workload. I'd say about 50 to 75 carries potentially this fall. We'll see what happens. He would certainly be next in line for the snaps, I think, if something happens to one of these top 2 backs from a health standpoint. 191 yards per game last season for the Bulldogs on the ground. It wasn't great from a production standpoint. Looking at 191, there's a lot of teams that did better in that. But that's still, for this offense, a great number because they had very healthy balance. They were only 7th in the conference in carries, too. They didn't run it really that much. But when they did, they were very good. The model of consistency, really, they almost rip up some big runs against Bama in the SEC title game where they were held to 109 yards. I think that was the season low. But games against, like, Arkansas, Kentucky, like you've seen, even Tennessee, games where they're not running 50, 60 times games. They don't have to. They're very effective. They're very consistent. Average over 5 yards per carry. Versus almost everybody, it seemed. If you look at their split stats, they ran for over 5 yards per carry against non-winning teams versus winning teams as well. So model of consistency was this running game. I don't expect that to fall off too much, even though James Cook leaving. He's a top-notch player. He's a very versatile, athletic guy. So that's a big loss, but I don't expect any fall off really. And I think that might even get better in the trenches because they return a lot on the offensive line. remain largely intact. That's why the running game might even be better. They lose two big movers on the left side, Jamari Soler, Justin Schaefer, but high-end 5 stars in Broderick Jones, Amarius Mims. They're going to battle for that left tackle spot, I think. Jones, long-armed tackle, very good athlete. This spring's going to be focused on adding more strength, getting better technique, and improving his aggressiveness. That's really his biggest knock so far, but everything else checks out. That's why he was a 5-star prospect, and I have no problem. I have no issues with him adding strength, and he'll get there in terms of physicality. That's just going to take some coaching, I think, but Georgia, these guys are big, strong, every position it seems. So he'll get there in those categories. I would like to see what happens on the right tackle, though. Warren McClendon seems to be the starter. I think that's kind of penciled in right now, but Amarius Mims, he might even work his way into that job there. So we'll see what happens. I'm very interested in the tackle spots. But more so, I think the interior, Cedric Van Pran at center is the only penciled-in starter on the interior. Tate Rutledge, he's out with an injury this spring. Warren Erickson is a senior, but he's not a lock for the spot at either guard position. So I think the interior is more intriguing than the tackle positions. We'll see what happens, though, on the offensive front. This offensive line, though, they're big, they're nasty. They showed it against Michigan. They held that pass rush completely in check. Alabama, of course, they had stints of success. But for the most part, I think they held up very well. Especially in that second half, they were able to, give Bennett time, and he was able to make throws downfield. So this offensive line, they're big, nasty, physical. They're the cornerstone of this offense. Looking at receiver, they don't really lose much in the core. Jermaine Burton's off to Alabama, George Pickens to the NFL. But they get everybody back, really. Ladd McConkey, Kyrus Jackson. These guys are 6 foot. They're both under 200 pounds, though. Donnie Mitchell, he's also under 200 pounds, but he is 6'4". But overall, they lack size of wide receiver. I know there were some people arguing with me on that point I made when I made my SEC championship preview. Those are the 3 starters likely at receiver. Size is not ideal. At tight end, it's phenomenal, but from a pure wide receiver standpoint, they don't really have it. They have plenty of speed with some versatile skill sets. Arian Smith, he's got elite track star speed. Some other guys like Marcus Rosemy Saint, Dominic Blaylock, they haven't played much. There's some reports, I think, that Eric Gilbert is going to move over to wide receiver. Of course, he is a great player, Eric Gilbert. At least he was in high school. At least he does from a skill set standpoint. Didn't play last year at all at LSU. He was pretty solid as a freshman. He was a former 5-star recruit, Eric Gilbert. He's big, though. He is a big player. 6'5", 248. If he can convert the athleticism with the size he has to receiver, this should be an interesting experiment to see what happens. Eric Gilbert, though, he could really add a lot of size, much needed, too, to that receiving core. Because even guys like Dominic Blaylock, who's 6'1", 205, size is not great in the receiving core. They have a variety of skill sets, though. They have guys who they fit what they're trying to do here. They've won a lot of screens. They even get Brock Bowers, who we'll get to in a minute, involved. But they have smaller guys who are shifty. They're athletic. They got speed. And that's really what has helped this offense kind of thrive. They don't really need big-time receivers in terms of stature to go out there and make plays. It's nice to have those, but I think they got a very healthy dosage of a variety of receivers. At tight end, though, Brock Bowers, I think he's the nation's best tight end. Michael Mayer at Notre Dame's pretty good, but this guy, 6'4", 230, he's probably going to get even bigger this offseason. It's kind of ridiculous how good he moves for his size and for being a tight end. 58 receptions, 882 yards, 13 touchdowns a season ago. If T.J. Hawkinson a couple years ago went top 10 in the draft, and this guy, you can only imagine what his ceiling is. He moves very well, got a lot of speed, great hands, is very decisive route runner as well, very good after the catch. Brock Bowers is ridiculous. Darnell Washington, 6'7", 265. Remember, his size coming out of high school, they were comparing it to LeBron James. It's ridiculous how big this guy is. But he only has 17 receptions in his first 2 years. His only career touchdown came in the SEC title game against Bama on a jump ball in the red zone. I'd like to see him get more involved. And I don't know if it's from a coaching standpoint. I don't know if he's earning it in practice or what. I don't know. I would like to see him get more involved, though, especially in the red zone this year. He's clearly an amazing talent. The size is off the charts. Big-bodied guy. I think that he needs to find his way into the offense a little bit more. Todd Monken needs to find ways to incorporate him because he's a weapon. I mean, when you're that big and he's a 5-star athlete coming out of high school. So this is a guy that I really want to see get more involved this year. I think him with Brock Bowers and then Eric Gilbert, if he plays some tight end as well. These guys are loaded at that position. I have no worries there. Overall, though, they get a lot of production back on offense, a lot of skill. I'm not really too worried about this unit. I'm not sure what, from a numbers standpoint, I'm not sure what they're going to look like. I don't expect them to fall off really one bit, though. Very interesting to see who takes the reins over as number one running back and who's going to be a standout at wide receiver, because everyone kind of has even production. McContney and Mitchell, they're pretty even. I think Arian Smith was a guy to watch, his speed. He had 3 catches last year for over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. So obviously he only played a couple of games, didn't play much because he was injured, but when he played, he made an impact. So that's the guy I'm really eyeing this season. Now to the big marbles everyone's probably been waiting on is this defense. What are they going to do? They replace a lot of beef. All of it on the defensive line is gone. Their entire front 7 is wiped out. They lose all 7 starters from their front 7. They do get back 2 veteran edge rushers, which we'll get to them in a minute. We'll start with this defensive line, though. A little concerned about this unit. Not overly concerned because I know they'll figure it out. They've been top 2 in rush defense each of the last 3 seasons. But over the last 2 recruiting classes in 2020 and 2021, they only landed 2 guys ranked inside the top 20 at the position. Now, of course, they got 3 inside the top 15 in the class of 22, Michael Williams being one of them. But I'm not going to bank on true freshmen to come in and just make a giant impact on the defensive front. I do think Barry Alexander being 6'3", 325, he'd probably be the biggest impact freshman on this defense. But I'm always hesitant on true freshmen, no matter what school they play at. How fast can they adjust? What role will they play? It's always a question mark. So that's really what the spring's going to be focused on, though, is a lot of these incoming guys, where they're going to play, who's going to line up where in the front 7, mainly on the D-line. Jalen Carter, though, he was at times the best defensive lineman on this roster, I thought, last year. 8.5 tackles for loss. That was 3rd on the team. He's very explosive, very nimble as an athlete, very powerful, too. He's probably the top defensive tackle in college football. Moves very well for his size. He's a big-time playmaker, Jalen Carter. I'm a fan of his. But who else is going to step up is the real question mark. Nazir Stackhouse, 6'3", 320. Zion Logie, 6'5", 295. I think Warren Brinson might even get involved a bit. This group is really up for grabs. I'm not sure who the starters will be anywhere on this defensive line outside of Jalen Carter. That's the biggest group to watch. They will lose everybody. Devontae Wyatt's going, Jordan Davis, Trayvon Walker even got involved on the interior. So this is a very interesting spring to see who lines up where on this defensive line, because these guys were so good last year. It's probably the greatest front 7 in college football history. It was that good. Very interested, though, to see what happens this spring at this positional group. And to the edge rushers I was just talking about, though, I'm not really too worried about their pass rush. Robert Beal, he's a veteran. I think he's going to have a big-time season. He had a tackle for loss in 5 of the last 6 games to round out the season. He stepped up in Adam Anderson's departure. I think he should probably lead the team in sacks this year. More, if not him, then it'll be Nolan Smith coming off the other side. He could do wonders for his draft stock because he has a great first step, natural downhill pass rusher. Does most of his work from an athletic standpoint, though. He doesn't have great power or length. We'll see how much size and how much bulk he can add in this offseason. But I think from a pure athletic standpoint, I believe he had 10 tackles for loss this past season, so he did hit double figures in that. UJ, they have some short-term questions on defense in this front 7. Edge rushing, though, I think they're going to be just fine. I'm not too worried about that. Another part of this front 7 I'm interested to see what happens on the interior linebacker position. They have 2 5-stars in Xavier Sori, Smail Munden. They're going to probably be penciled in here as starters. Munden, he's got great pursuit. His athletic ability and coverage has really stood out. Very excited for his potential. Sori, on the other hand, he's very strong, but he wasn't exactly a downhill tackler in high school. I think Will Muschamp, Kirby Smart, they'll probably get that out of him, though. They'll probably make him a much better, more violent tackler. He could potentially be an off-ball linebacker, though, or come off even the edge this season because he's got a good athletic profile. Sori, I think his role is more up in the air than Munden's is. I'm pretty sure he's going to be replacing Nakobe Dean there at middle linebacker. What will Sori do, though? It's kind of up in the air. We'll see what happens with him. We'll see how good of a spring he has. We'll see where they line him up. I think if he gets better in some of his weakness areas, then he'll probably be an inside linebacker. But I'm not too worried about the front 7, even though they replace pretty much everybody. 5 stars everywhere, highly recruited guys. Short term, maybe earlier in the season, it may be a little shaky, but I think for the most part, as the weeks tick down, this defense will be fine. They've done it every single year. They replace everybody. It's just like Alabama. They replace whoever, and in a short period of time, they're back to being great. Glenn Schumann and Will Muschamp, as defensive coordinators, they know that coming into the year, the secondary kind of needs some work. I picked Bama in the SEC title game and in the national championship against Georgia just because I knew that this defensive line did the heavy lifting all year long, and I knew that their secondary, they would be tested if the defensive line was held in check, and they were in the SEC title game. They got throttled, 400-plus passing yards against those receivers. The secondary had been questionable to me all season long. A lot of people didn't like the prediction when I picked them to lose in the SEC title game. But that's exactly what happened, though. Their secondary was not able to make up for the defensive line not getting the job done. Communication was tough. Covering middle of the field was an issue. Outside was not that bad. Keely Ringo, he had some issues against Tennessee and Bama, but he's still one of the raising top corners in college football. Good size at 205, great speed. I hear he runs a 4.35. He's had some issues, though, against those two. Also had bright spots as well, though. Even had the game-winning interception, a pick six against Bama in the national title game. He made some really good plays on the ball, 8 pass breakups. Ringo, he's going to be slotted for one of the top 2 cornerback positions. What will happen with the rest of the secondary? I don't know. They lose Amir Speed, Latavius Brin to the transfer portal. Darian Kendrick, he's gone. Lewis Sign as well. So this secondary wasn't great last year. I do think they had more interceptions than touchdowns, though. The defense was just phenomenal all around. But the secondary was certainly a weakness, I would say. If they played more better offenses, I think they would have had some issues. So we'll see what happens. I think that they certainly need to work on the communication, though. Ringo, he's a guy who can play up to the line of scrimmage. Tyke Smith, he only played in 2 games. He was really good in the slot in 2020 at West Virginia. 2 games last year, that's it, because he was beat up with injuries. We'll see how he fits into this offense or this defense. I really like Tyke Smith, though. He was a star at West Virginia. Kamari Lassiter and Nyland Green. I was a big fan of Green last year. I thought he'd play more of a role coming into the year. Remember, I'm pretty sure they replaced 5 starters coming into last season. I think they managed it pretty well, though, even though I wasn't a big fan of this back end. They replaced everybody. I'm pretty sure they replaced 4. Maybe some Georgia fans can correct me on that. It was 4 or 5 starters they lost. Nyland Green, I expected him to play a bigger role last year. He didn't play that much, but I think he will this season. Dan Jackson at safety. He had 40 tackles. I think he's in the slot into that starting safety spot. He didn't do much from a coverage aspect, but he was definitely a sure-handed tackler. Kamari Lassiter, though, he's another guy at corner to watch. The secondary, though, they do get back Christopher Smith. He's going to be a leader in this back end. He was one of their top tacklers a year ago. I think he's going to replace Lewis Sign with ease. Some other guys that were true freshmen, Jaheim Singletary, Malachi Starks. Those are 2 guys that potentially, if injuries start to plague this unit, I think you might see some early playing time from them. I think the secondary will be okay, though. They're getting a couple of veterans back. Ringo, I like his potential. Smith, obviously. It's still kind of questionable in my eyes as this secondary, but the front 7, I think, they're going to reload with ease. We'll see what happens. I love this defense, though. Potential, as always, Kirby Smart is going to have things figured out. They only allowed 10.2 points per game last year. It was a big improvement from 2020 where they allowed 20 points per game. I'm not really worried about this defense. From the short term, though, maybe. We'll take a look at the schedule here before we wrap things up. They kick off the season with Oregon. Dan Lanning, the defensive coordinator from Georgia, he leaves to play head coach for the Ducks. They meet up in Atlanta to kick off the year. I don't really expect that to be much of a contest. I don't think Oregon's going to be able to put up much of a fight, but you never know. Early season, everything's different. So Samford, week 2, tune-up game before they play an interesting game. Week 3 at South Carolina, they play Shane Beamer, Spencer Rattler, an exciting South Carolina team. That's going to be a very interesting game. It's very early in the season. There's not a lot of turnaround with this new defense. So this is going to be a game I'm going to be circling all off season long. The first half of the year, though, it's kind of an easy schedule. They get Kent State. They play on the road at Missouri. And then they get Auburn and Vanderbilt at home before the bye week. So I think first half of the year, outside of the South Carolina game, I think it's going to be pretty smooth sailing. Auburn, of course, that's never an easy matchup, though. So we'll see what happens there. Being at home, though, is obviously a big edge. They get that bye week. Florida and Tennessee, they get them in Athens. Tennessee's going to be a very good football team this year, so that's going to be an interesting game late in the year. 2 interesting games, though, I think, here in November at Mississippi State, at Kentucky. Kentucky's a really good ball team. They're getting back some really big weapons on offense. Mississippi State, that air raid offense, their defense has also been very good over the last 2 years for Mike Leach. The last time Mississippi State played Georgia, though, that's when JT Daniels had that big 4-touchdown game 2 years ago. It was a close game. They only beat them, I think it was 31-24. It was a very close ball game with Mississippi State. And then to round out the year, they get Georgia Tech, who they've beaten by 45 points each of the last 2 years. So that's not going to be much of a contest. But I think the schedule is a little bit tougher than it was last year. Then, of course, a potential SEC championship December 3rd. I think at Mississippi State, at Kentucky, Auburn, South Carolina. There's plenty of games here. Even Oregon, you could say. There's plenty of respect to be earned here. I'd say this is a pretty moderate schedule, though. I like what Georgia has on the docket, though. It's not a cakewalk like a Clemson schedule usually is by any means. So that's going to wrap everything up for this episode, guys. Make sure you comment, like, subscribe. See you next time.